Hey everyone, I'm LordFatzberry and this is how I reached All-Star in Stadium using Sigma during Season 17. I'm going to be showcasing two different builds for this video. One that is a self-sustain oriented build, while the other is a DPS powerhouse early on, but later transitions into an unkillable raid boss. When it comes to which build to choose, I typically look at the enemy team's lineup. If I see brawly tanks like Rhine or Junker Queen, I'll build Sigma into that DPS style build. But if the enemy team is mirroring Sig or playing tanks like Diva, Orisa, or Zarya, I'll focus on creating a healing build that focuses solely on survivability. Let's start with the self-sustain build. I'll call this one the SSS build, the self-sustain Sigma build. Round 1. You're going to want to grab the power Orbital Barrier. This is going to create a small personal barrier that floats around Sigma. Nothing too impactful, but it has saved me on many occasions from getting CC'd. For items, you're going to grab Compensator for just a little bit of weapon power. Since this is a sustain build, we're going to focus on lifesteal items, so grab Plasma Converter and Siphon Gloves. Plasma Converter is going to give your primary fire Hyperspheres a 10% weapon lifesteal, while Siphon Gloves is going to give you 25 health per quick melee you land. Round 2. Depending on how well round 1 went, you should be able to afford the purple survival item called Decalper's Thesis. This is a very crucial and important item to have early on in this build. If you cannot initially afford it, it is perfectly okay to sell some or all of your green items to pay for it. What Decalper's Thesis does is it gives Sigma an extra 50 shield, but more importantly, your experimental barrier heals nearby allies for 3% of your max life every 1 second. For example, say you have 700 HP as Sigma. Your barrier, when deployed, is going to heal nearby teammates 21 HP every second. Congratulations, you've officially become the third support on the team. On to round 3. Here, we're going to grab the power Philharmonic Fortitude. This increases the HP of experimental barrier by 25%, and the barrier will constantly regenerate. Something to note is that while deployed, it regenerates HP 50% slower, so if you're being attacked with a lot of spam or burst damage, such as a Junkrat's primary fire or a Cassidy's Fan the Hammer, it would be smart to recall your barrier during a lot of these fights. Your barrier is crucial to the success of this build. For items, we're going to grab the blue survival item, Synced Shielding. This item is rather interesting. While behind your barrier, you gain a 5% weapon power and attack speed. While you're in front of it, you gain a 10% move speed and weapon lifesteal. If you're going up against beam heroes like Zarya or Mei, I would highly recommend getting the power Beam Splitter. This gives Sigma 25 extra shield, but also the ability to use Kinetic Grasp, also known as his Eat, to reduce beam damage by 50%. Something that he is not normally able to do. If you still have some money left over or have not bought Beam Splitter, I would highly recommend getting the survival item Mecha Z Series. This item isn't anything crazy, but it does give Sigma an 8% increase to health, armor, and shields. Remember, more HP equals more healing your experimental barrier will provide. Alright, so we made it to round 4. If you haven't already, at this point you shouldn't have any more green items, but if you do, sell them. Grab the purple survival item, Martian Mender. This item gives you an additional 25 HP, a 10% cooldown reduction, and restores 3% of your HP every 1 second. I'd also recommend grabbing the blue survival item, Crusader's Hydraulics. This gives you 25 additional armor, and while you have armor, you take 10% less damage from enemy primary fire. Round 5 is when things kind of dull down for this build. The next power we're going to get is Event Horizon. When you absorb damage with Kinetic Grasp, it will restore experimental barriers HP. Depending on your playstyle or how well you're playing as a team, you can sell Mecha Z Series and grab the purple survival item Gloom Gauntlet. This pairs well with Crusader Hydraulics, as it gives you an additional 50 armor. Additionally, your melee damage is increased by 15%, and when you land hits with quick melee, you are granted a temporary 10% movement speed and 5% of your max HP is restored over 2 seconds. If you've made it to round 6, then it's time to bid farewell to Beam Splitter or Crusader Hydraulics. Let's replace it with Divine Intervention. This purple survival item gives 50 additional shield, and when you take more than 100 damage at once, you restore 20% of that damage taken and start regenerating your shields instantly. Round 7. Wow! This must be a really close game if we've made it this far. Here, we're going to pick up the power Maestro. This will pair really well with an item that I'll talk about in just a sec. Maestro cuts your ultimate cost in half, but also reduces the size of Gravitic Flux by half. Basically, you're going to get your ultimate very fast, at least once or twice a team fight. The item I would recommend getting to pair with Maestro is Vanadium Injection. This grants 50 additional shields, and while your ultimate is at 100% charge, you gain 50 HP and a 10% increase to weapon power, ability power, attack speed, cooldown reduction, and movement speed. Your final build should look something like this. For powers, we have Orbital Barrier, Philharmonic Fortitude, Event Horizon, and Maestro. For items, I would recommend you end with Vanadium Injection, Divine Intervention, Gloom Gauntlet, Martian Mender, Decopper's Thesis, and Synced Shielding. Alright, let's transition over to the DPS Raid Boss build. For round 1, we are going to grab the power Trinisphere. This gives Sigma a third Hypersphere that does 50% less damage than the other two that he traditionally has. For items, we're going to grab Compensator, Weapon Grease, and Armored Vest. With this power and items, you are already going to be able to do a decent amount of chip and poke damage to the enemy team. This should be able to help rack in a little extra money going into round 2. Time for round 2. Let's go ahead and sell all those green items and grab the blue weapon items, Velocity Vector, and Talon Modification Module. Velocity Vector gives Sigma a 10% increase to his attack speed and a 15% increase to the range of his hyperspheres. Talon Modification Module is just a pure 15% increase to Sigma's weapon power. If you have a little bit of money left over, feel free to add back on Compensator or Weapon Grease for just a little bit more power or speed. Round 3. At this point in the build, this is where I invest in the power Zero Gravity. This power is really good at getting away from hyper-aggressive tanks such as Reinhardt, who love to close the distance and be up in Sigma's face. When using an ability like Accretion or Kinetic Grasp, Sigma gains the ability to fly for 2.5 seconds. This is an extremely useful escape tool. For items, I try to grab the purple weapon power Antimatter. This item gives Sigma's hyperspheres an additional 15% weapon power, as well as a 35% larger explosive radius. For those who didn't know, Sigma's orbs do splash damage, so even if you are not directly hit by one, you can still take a bit of AoE damage from the orb. This item just helps to secure more damage. It's round 4. This is where you have to make a split decision depending on the type of heroes the enemy team is using. I have found that adding Aerial Distressor is a very useful item to have if they are running characters such as Mercy or Juno, as their kit is based around them being in the air. Aerial Distressor is a purple weapon power that grants Sigma 25 additional shields and a 10% attack speed. Damage dealt with hyperspheres to airborne enemies also deals 25% bonus damage for 3 seconds. If Aerial Distressor is too expensive at the moment, or if they're playing more grounded heroes, I'd recommend grabbing the blue weapon power Maglev Multiplier. When using your ultimate Gravitic Flux, enemies are lifted up in the air 25% longer and will take 20% more damage from your hyperspheres. By round 5, this is where we drop a lot of our weapon power and start to build into sustain, and you'll notice this is going to resemble a lot of the SSS build from earlier. We're going to pick up Philharmonic Fortitude as our power this round. And as a reminder, this power increases the HP of Experimental Barrier and allows it to regenerate while deployed. Sell all of your items, everything. We're going to rebuild from scratch. Grab Decopper's Thesis and Martian Mender. Just like the SSS build, we're going to transition to a full sustain and survivability kit. Add Rüstung von Wilhelm. This purple survival item gives Sigma an additional 15% health, armor, and shield. If your HP drops below 30%, you also gain a 10% damage reduction. An important item that pairs well with von Wilhelm is Crusader Hydraulics. Just like last time, this is going to give Sigma 25 extra armor, and while you have armor, you also take 10% reduced weapon damage. Whew, alright, round 6. Let's keep building. At this point of the game, you should grab Gloom Gauntlet. This is kind of a niche pick depending on how aggressive the enemy JQ or Rhine is playing. Just as a refresher, Gloom Gauntlet grants 50 armor and your melee damage is increased by 15%, and when you land hits with quick melee, you're granted a temporary 10% movement speed and 5% of your max HP is recovered every 2 seconds. Welcome to the final round. Round 7. If you made it this far, then holy crap, what a game, huh? Alright, time for your last power. We're going to grab Orbital Barrier. Just like the previous build, this is going to grant Sigma a mini barrier that orbits around him. By this point, we should be pretty kitted out on purple survival items. I'd recommend having Rüstung von Wilhelm, Martian Mender, Decopper's Thesis, Gloom Gauntlet, Crusader Hydraulics, and Divine Intervention. With all these combined, you're going to become quite tanky and very difficult to kill. With a higher regeneration rate, mobility to escape, you're going to become the raid boss of the stadium. And that's it. Those are the 2 builds that I used to help reach All-Star 5 in Overwatch 2 Stadium using Sigma during Season 17. I hope this video has been useful and helpful. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm always open to more suggestions or maybe more video ideas. Good luck in your matches, and I'll catch y'all next time.